All right, guys, this is lesson 7-7. And in this lesson, we're going to be working to identify fractions that are less than, greater than, and equal to 1/2. Now, in yesterday's lesson, we were looking at fractions that were less than, greater than, and equal to 1/2. So let's go ahead and review that real quick. We learned yesterday that if we have a fraction where, let's say, the numerator is smaller than the denominator, we know that fraction is less than 1/2. Because if we are eating fewer slices than what it is cut up into, we know we're eating less than the whole object. Okay? If our fraction has a numerator that is the same as our denominator, we know that fraction is equal to 1/2. Because if we are eating the same number of slices as what our pizza is cut up into, we are eating the whole pizza. If our fraction has a numerator that is bigger than the denominator, we know that that fraction is greater than 1/2 because we are actually going to be eating more slices than what our pizza is even cut up into, so of course we're going to have to bake another pizza. So we're talking about a fraction that is bigger than a whole. All right, so now in today's lesson, we're going to specifically look at comparing fractions to 1/2. I told you in 3rd grade, one of the big things that we have to do is being able to identify equivalent fractions, and we've done a lot of work with that in the last few days. And we have to look at comparing fractions, being able to figure out which fraction is bigger and which fraction is smaller. Really understanding 1/2 and what 1/2 looks like is really going to be the key to helping you compare fractions, because you should be able to look at any fraction and be able to tell if it is greater than, equal to, or less than 1/2. All right, so let's look at page 235 in our workbooks. And here's what I want us to practice doing. You are going to use the fraction number line posters to help you kind of put fractions into these boxes. You're going to put fractions that are less than 1/2. You're going to put fractions that are equal to 1/2, and you are going to put fractions that are greater than 1/2. Now here's what I want you to do to help you with that. If you go back to page 229 in your workbook, okay, we actually created a number line poster several days ago in class, and we have this now as a tool. I told you guys if you really worked hard at being precise and being accurate, you have now created a really great fraction tool right there in your workbook that you'll be able to refer back to. If for some reason you were absent, or maybe yours doesn't look so good and you're not able to really use it as a tool, you can always go in and Google fraction number lines, and you'll get pictures just like this that you'll be able to find online. Okay? So go ahead and go to page 229 in your workbook, and I want you to look at all of the fractions that, let's go ahead and just list out all of the fractions that are equal to 1/2. Okay, we talked about this when we made this poster. So if you go down through here, all the way down through your poster, there are all of the fractions that are equal to 1/2. So you can go back to your workbook, page 235, and you can go ahead and list all of those fractions here in the fractions that are equal to 1/2. You can either pause the video, or you can continue watching until the end and then go back and do that. And then you can go back to your page 229, and now take a look at all of the fractions that are less than 1/2. So we're going to be talking about any of these fractions that are less than 1/2. And you can go back to your page 235 and list all of those fractions here. And then you're going to go back to your number line poster, and you're going to find all of the fractions that are greater than 1/2. Oops, I guess I need to include these too, right? And you can go ahead and list those fractions here in this section, fractions that are greater than 1/2. Okay? can go ahead and go through and kind of answer some of these questions based on those fractions. You can pause the video and take care of that, and then come back. I want to talk to you a little bit about what you should have noticed. All right, so let's start with those important fractions that are equal to a half. Now, guys, we have already looked at this. We've already talked about this pretty extensively in class. Anytime a fraction is equal to 1/2, we talked about how the numerator is half of the denominator, because when we think about it in terms of pizza, which always helps us to think about fractions, if we are eating 1 out of 2 slices, we're eating half of it, right? The numerator is going to be half of the denominator. So if our pizza is cut into 4 slices and we eat 2 of them, we have eaten half of the pizza, right? 2 out of 4. Again, my numerator is half of my denominator. I ate half the pizza. My numerator is half my denominator. Some of us like to look at it in terms of if I can take my numerator and double it and get that for my denominator, I know that fraction equals 1/2. So guys, you should be able to look at any fraction that is thrown at you, and you should be able to tell right away if it equals 1/2. So I can give you, I told you, we're going to focus on halves, thirds, fourths, sixths, and eighths. Those are the only fractions that we're really going to focus on this year. But I should be able to give you any fraction, like 6/12, and you should be able to tell me if that's equal to a half or not. Because if you can take the numerator and double it to get your denominator, you know that equals 1/2. Okay, so any fraction, you should be able to tell me if it equals 1/2. I should be able to give you the denominator of any fraction. Let's say I tell you the denominator is 10. You should be able to tell me that 5/10 equals 1/2. Okay, so at this point, we are pretty good at being able to identify if a fraction equals 1/2. Now, when you're really comfortable with that and you really understand and know what that looks like and what that means, now you should be able to identify any fraction that's less than a half and any fraction that's greater than a half. So that's what I want you to start looking at. Look at some of those fractions on your number line poster. Let's say I gave you the fraction 1/4. Okay, you need to be able to think, if I double 1, will I get 4? Well, no, 1 plus 1 is 2, so that's less than the 4, so you know that that's less than 1/2. If I give you the fraction 3/4, okay, take your numerator and double it. 3 plus 3 is 6. That's greater than 4, so you know that fraction is greater than 1/2. Okay? Let's say I give you a fraction. Now, fractions with even denominators are going to be pretty easy to think about that, because remember, we can split any even number in half. But even if we look at our thirds, so let's say I gave you 1/3, okay? If I double 1, 1 plus 1 is 2. 2 is less than 3, so I know that's less than 1/2. If you want to think of it as a picture, remember, go ahead and draw out your fraction circle and think, if I eat 1 out of 3 slices, I'm eating less than half. Guys, you could even put up 3 fingers. If you're eating only, let's say this is, 3 pieces of candy, if you're getting to eat 1 out of the 3 slices, or out of the 3 pieces, aren't you eating less than half of them? If my fraction is 2/3, I can double my numerator. 2 plus 2 is 4. Well, 4 is greater than 3, and so I know that this fraction is greater than 1/2. Okay, so that's just a quick, easy way to identify if a fraction is greater than, equal to, or less than 1/2. So I'm going to put 3 fractions on the board here. I'm going to put, let's see, 4/8. I'm going to put 1/4. And I am going to put 4/6. Okay, let's look at 4/8. Look at your numerator, double it. 4 plus 4 is 8, so that is exactly equal to 1/2. Okay, looking at 1/4, 1 plus 1 is 2, that's less than 4, So this fraction is less than a half. 4 plus 4 is 8. That 8 is greater than 6, so this fraction is greater than 1/2. Okay, I'm going to do another set of fractions. I feel like I said something weird and silly there, and so I have no idea at this point. Let me go ahead and do a few more fractions. So let's say I have the fraction 3/4, 3/6, and 3/8. All right, let's go through this again. So now we're checking to see if this fraction is greater than a half, equal to a half, or less than a half. Okay, so look at your numerator. If you double your numerator, 3 plus 3 is 6. Okay, 6 is greater than 4, so you know that this fraction is greater than a half. Let's look at the next fraction. 3 plus 3 is 6. 6 equals 6, so this fraction is equal to a half. Let's look at 3/8. 3 plus 3 is 6. 6 is less than 8, so this fraction is less than a half. And guys, for a while, until you really start getting comfortable with that, practice going through, looking at it mathematically like that, doubling the numerator and figuring out if it's greater than or less than a half, and then draw the fraction out and double check yourself. Okay, so here's what I want you to do as an extension of this lesson today. And you can do this today or over the course of the next couple of days. If you look in the back of your workbooks, to where we have those pages that are kind of like on cardstock, you have several pages of fraction cards that you can go ahead and cut out. I want you to go ahead and cut these out and put them into a baggie, and so that you have them nice and handy. And you'll be able to use these as some tools and for some games as we move through these next couple of weeks. Okay, so if you notice on those fraction cards, on one side there are fraction circles that are shaded in, and on the flip side are just the fractions written as numbers. So what you could do is go ahead and lay these cards out on a table and start categorizing them. Start putting them into piles of fractions that are equal to a half, fractions that are less than a half, and fractions that are greater than a half. And then you can flip them over and look at the picture on the other side to check yourself. So this will be a great, kind of like what we would do in class in centers to help you practice this skill a little bit more. All right, guys, I will see you in the next lesson.